My stepmother tried to take over my father's retirement home, claiming she was his caretaker. In court, she cried, I deserve to stay there. I quietly presented a letter from the nursing home manager, revealing she had been evicted for abuse. Her lawyer stammered, we didn't know that. I never thought I'd be the type of person to sit in a courtroom, watching a grown woman cry as her lawyer stammered in confusion. But life has a funny way of forcing you into situations you never expected. My name is Jake. I'm 42, a software engineer living in Chicago. My father, Richard, spent his entire life working his ass off as a construction foreman. He was a tough man, proud, independent, and loyal to a fault. After decades of backbreaking work, he finally retired and bought himself a condo in Naples, Florida. It was supposed to be his peaceful retreat. Instead, it became a battleground. My dad had been a widower for 6 years when he met Nancy. She was 15 years younger, blonde, overly friendly in that fake, performative way. She had never worked a real job but had a talent for making men feel needed. I got a bad feeling the moment I met her. So did my sister, Claire. Dad, however, was lonely. He was used to having my mom by his side. And Nancy? She made sure he believed she was his second chance at happiness. Within a year, they were married. At first, things seemed fine. Then, little changes started happening. Nancy convinced my dad to put her name on his bank accounts, just in case something happened. Then she started pushing him to change his will. She made him feel like it was the responsible thing to do, like it would make things easier for everyone if everything just went to her. Then she started isolating him. Every time I called, he was napping. If I visited, she never left us alone. If he had friends over, she complained that it was too much noise. She convinced him to stop seeing his old buddies, saying they were bad influences. It wasn't obvious at first. It was slow. But over time, I realized, she wasn't just controlling his home. She was controlling his entire life. Then, about a year ago, Dad started getting sick. He lost weight. His energy levels plummeted. He always seemed tired. Whenever I asked if he'd seen a doctor, Nancy would chime in before he could answer. Oh, he's fine. Just getting older, you know. But it wasn't just age. He had never been the type to complain about his health, and suddenly, he looked frail. Something wasn't right. Then I got the call. It was late, almost midnight. I picked up, groggy, expecting it to be a spam call or an emergency alert. But it was my father. His voice was weak. Jake, something's wrong. Immediately, I was awake. What's wrong, Dad? What's happening? I don't know. I feel sick all the time. She won't let me go to the doctor. I sat up straight. What? What do you mean she won't let you? She says I'm just overreacting. But, then I heard shuffling. A door opening. Nancy's voice, sharp and irritated. Richard. What are you doing? And then, click. The line went dead. I didn't hesitate. I booked the first flight to Florida and showed up at his condo unannounced. Nancy opened the door in a silk robe, eyes narrowing when she saw me standing there with my suitcase. What are you doing here? She asked, arms crossed. I pushed past her. Where's Dad? He's sleeping, she snapped. I ignored her and walked straight to his room. What I saw made my blood turn cold. He looked like a ghost of himself. His face was sunken, his skin pale. He struggled to sit up when he saw me. Jake. His voice was barely a whisper. I turned to Nancy. When was the last time he saw a doctor? She rolled her eyes. Oh, stop being dramatic. He's just tired. I wasn't having it. I packed his bag right then and there. She protested the entire time, but I didn't care. We're going to the hospital, I said, dragging his suitcase to the door. Nancy blocked the doorway. You're not taking him anywhere. I don't know what she thought was going to happen. Maybe she expected me to back down. Maybe she thought I'd be intimidated by her fake authority. But I wasn't playing games. If you don't move, I said, voice low, I will call the cops. That did it. She stepped aside, arms crossed, fuming. I helped my dad into the car and drove him straight to the ER. Turns out, my father was severely dehydrated and malnourished. His sodium levels were dangerously high. The doctor told me that if I hadn't brought him in when I did, he wouldn't have lasted another month. Nancy had not been taking care of him. In fact, she had been neglecting him on purpose. She wasn't feeding him properly. She wasn't giving him water. She wasn't letting him leave the house. And the worst part? He had been completely dependent on her. She had taken over his finances. His bank accounts. His access to transportation. She had full control over everything. I saw red. While Dad was recovering, I got to work. First, I called every financial institution he had accounts with and had them lock her out. Since she was a co-signer, she could no longer access anything without his direct permission. Then, I went to his lawyer. Turns out, Nancy had pushed him into changing his will. Everything, his money, his condo, his savings, was set to go straight to her. But Dad, in his weakened state, hadn't realized what he had signed. With his full consent, we revoked everything. The will, the power of attorney, all of it. Then, I made a call to the retirement community's manager. Apparently, Nancy had been causing major problems. She had been rude to staff, throwing tantrums when things didn't go her way, and treating the place like she owned it. The moment they found out she had been neglecting my father, they evicted her. When Nancy came home that night, she found herself locked out. She lost her mind. She called me screaming, demanding I let her in. I told her she had 24 hours to collect her stuff before it was tossed. She refused. Instead, she did something insane. She hired a lawyer. She was about to take me to court. And that? That was the biggest mistake of her life. Nancy was furious. After I took my father to the hospital and had her locked out of his accounts, she went ballistic. She called me over 40 times in 2 days. Left me nasty voicemails, flipping between rage and fake crying. This is abuse, Jake. You can't do this to me. I have rights. Your father would be disgusted if he knew what you were doing to his wife. I'm warning you, if you don't let me back in, I will take legal action. I didn't answer a single one. I just saved them. And then, just as I expected, she sued us. A week later, I got a legal notice in the mail. Nancy had hired a lawyer and was suing me on my father's behalf. Yes. You read that right. She was trying to claim that I had manipulated my father into revoking her financial access while he was mentally vulnerable. She demanded that the court reinstate her as his legal caretaker and grant her the right to remain in his home. Her argument? She had sacrificed everything to care for my father. She had nowhere else to go. Kicking her out was inhumane. And get this, she claimed my father was too sick to make legal decisions on his own. Oh, but here's the best part. She forged a fake letter from my father. It said that he regretted cutting her out and that I had forced him to sign the new documents while he was heavily medicated. I stared at that letter for a full minute before bursting out laughing. She thought she was so clever. She thought I was just some naive idiot who would roll over. She had no idea what was coming. I immediately called my lawyer, a shark of a woman named Marissa. When I told her what was happening, she sighed and said, "Let's destroy her." Here's what we gathered: Nancy was evicted from the retirement community for abuse and misconduct. Hospital records prove my father was malnourished and dehydrated under her care. The nursing staff confirmed she was preventing him from seeing a doctor. My father himself was ready to testify. And the cherry on top? That forged letter. The handwriting didn't match my father's at all. Not even close. Marissa had a forensic document examiner analyze it. The expert's conclusion: it was 100% a forgery. That alone was enough to turn the tide in our favor. But just to be safe, I had another secret weapon. While digging through my father's financial records, I found something interesting. Nancy had been moving thousands of dollars from my father's account into her personal account. Little amounts at first, $500 here, $800 there. But then I found a $10,000 transfer marked as a loan repayment. My dad never loaned her money. I showed him the records, and his face darkened. She told me that was to pay for my medications. Spoiler, it wasn't. She had been siphoning his money little by little. And the best part? She had been doing it after he got sick. If she wanted to argue that she had sacrificed everything for him, then maybe she should have paid for something other than her own shopping sprees. I handed all of this to my lawyer. She smiled. Nancy had no idea what she had just walked into. The trial was set. The day of the hearing, I walked into that courtroom, feeling calm. Nancy, on the other hand, She looked like absolute garbage. Her makeup was uneven, her hair was a mess, and she wore a dress that was way too tight, like she was trying to prove she was still some grieving widow. Her lawyer looked nervous. Probably because he had seen the evidence we were about to drop on them. The judge, an older woman with zero patience for drama, asked for opening statements. Nancy's lawyer went first. Your Honor, my client is a devoted wife who has cared for her husband through illness and hardship. She has been unfairly removed from her home and left with no financial support. She merely wishes to continue fulfilling her role as caretaker. I didn't even listen. I just watched Nancy. She sniffled. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue. It was like watching a second-rate soap opera actress overplay a funeral scene. Then my lawyer stood up. Your Honor, Marissa said, this case is not about a devoted wife. It is about a woman who deliberately isolated and financially exploited a vulnerable man. A woman who prevented him from receiving medical care. A woman who was evicted for abuse. A woman who, just last month, forged a letter in an attempt to steal a home that does not belong to her. Silence. Even Nancy's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Then the evidence started rolling in. The hospital records. The retirement home eviction notice. The forensic report confirming the forgery. Nancy's fake tears dried up real fast. And then, the final blow. I handed over the bank records. The judge frowned as she flipped through them. Mrs. Hayes, she said, looking at Nancy over her glasses, can you explain why you transferred over $10,000 from your husband's account into your personal checking? Nancy's face turned white as a sheet. I was reimbursing myself for expenses, she stammered. The judge raised an eyebrow. Expenses? Do you have receipts? Silence. Nancy's lawyer cleared his throat awkwardly. We were unaware of these transactions, Your Honor. Of course they were. Nancy looked around the courtroom like a cornered rat. Like she was hoping someone would magically save her. No one did. Then, the judge looked at my father. Mr. Hayes, do you wish to reinstate your wife as your caretaker? My father, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke. His voice was firm. No, Nancy let out an actual gasp. And for the first time in years, my father looked her in the eye and said, "Get out." Nancy sat frozen, staring at my father like he had just slapped her. She had expected him to be weak, confused, or too old to make a decision. But his voice had been clear, firm, and final. She wasn't getting back in. But of course, Nancy wasn't done. Just when I thought she had finally shut up and accepted reality, her face twisted in desperation. And then, she did something insane. Your Honor, Nancy blurted out, I'd like to request a delay in this case. Her lawyer turned to her, completely confused. What? Nancy, but she ignored him. My husband is clearly not in the right mental state to be making these decisions, she said, her voice cracking with forced emotion. I believe he is being manipulated by my stepson. I need time to get a psychiatric evaluation to prove that he's not well. The judge narrowed her eyes. Mrs. Hayes, are you suggesting your husband is incompetent? Nancy nodded eagerly, her hands clutched together like she was praying. Yes, Your Honor. I love him, but he's not thinking clearly. If we could just do a full medical evaluation, I laughed. Out loud. Your Honor, I said, still grinning, it's funny how she's only now concerned about his medical condition, after she was caught stealing from him. Marissa, my lawyer, smirked. Your Honor, she said, I'd like to introduce a letter from Mr. Hayes' doctor confirming he is of sound mind and fully capable of making his own decisions. She slid the document across the table. The judge skimmed it, nodded, and then turned ice-cold eyes toward Nancy. Mrs. Hayes, she said flatly, your request for a delay is denied. Nancy twitched. Her last strategy had just gone up in flames. But then, she pulled something out of her bag. And my stomach dropped. Nancy held up another document, her hands trembling dramatically. This is my husband's real will, she said. He wrote this before he got sick. Before his son started poisoning him against me. Her lawyer buried his face in his hands. He clearly had no idea she was about to pull this stunt. The judge sighed. Bring it here. Nancy, smiling like she had just played the winning card, walked up and handed it over. I turned to Marissa. What do we do? I whispered. She leaned back, totally calm. Watch. The judge studied the document, flipping through the pages. Her face didn't change. But I noticed her eyebrows raise, just slightly, when she reached the last page. Then, she turned to Nancy. "Mrs. Hayes," she said, "this will is dated 3 months ago." Nancy nodded eagerly. "Yes. He wrote it before his son started interfering." The judge set the will down. "Mr. Hayes," she said, turning to my father, "did you sign this?" My father looked at it for a long moment. Then, his face darkened. "No," he said. "I've never seen that before in my life." Silence. Nancy started sweating. "Maybe he forgot," she blurted. "He's old. His memory isn't great." The judge held up a hand to silence her. Then she turned to the court officer. "Have this document analyzed immediately," she ordered. Within minutes, the officer returned with a simple conclusion. The signature was a forgery. Nancy collapsed into her seat. Her lawyer turned to her, whispering furiously. But at this point, it was too late. The judge was about to give her ruling when suddenly, a man in a suit stood up from the back of the courtroom. "Your Honor," he said, stepping forward, "I apologize for the interruption, but I have urgent evidence that needs to be presented." Everyone turned to look at him. Even Nancy seemed confused. The judge frowned. "Who are you?" He cleared his throat. "I'm from the Florida Department of Financial Regulation." And then, he pulled out his own stack of documents. "This case was flagged due to suspicious financial activity," he explained. "We've been investigating Mrs. Hayes for fraud." I felt my jaw drop. "Fraud?" I repeated. Nancy squeaked. The man nodded. "It seems Mrs. Hayes has a history of marrying elderly men, gaining access to their assets, and then siphoning money into offshore accounts." I nearly fell out of my chair. Nancy had done this before. And now, she had been caught. Nancy lost it. She jumped out of her chair, pointing wildly at me and my father. "This is a setup," she screamed. "You can't do this. That money was mine. I earned it." Her lawyer actually backed away from her, looking horrified. The judge slammed her gavel. "Sit down." Nancy didn't. She turned and ran for the door. 2 court officers caught her before she made it 10 feet. "Let me go. I'm his wife," she shrieked. "You can't do this to me." One of the officers cuffed her. The judge sighed, rubbing her temples. "Bailiff, please remove Mrs. Hayes from my courtroom." Nancy thrashed, still screaming. But I didn't hear her anymore. Because I was too busy looking at my father. For the first time in years, he looked relieved. And I knew, right then and there, that we had already won. Nancy was dragged out of the courtroom kicking and screaming. Her shrill voice echoed through the halls as she thrashed against the officers, shouting about how we had set her up. How we were stealing from her. How this was unfair. No one listened. The judge barely reacted. The court officers had seen worse. Even her own lawyer stood frozen, staring at his client like he had just realized he had been defending a psychopath. I, on the other hand, sat in my seat, heart pounding. Because no matter how much evidence we had against her, I never expected it to end like this. Nancy, the woman who had controlled my father's life for years, was now being escorted out in handcuffs. And yet, even though she was gone, the tension in the room remained. Because there was one last thing left to do. The judge turned to my father. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "I apologize for that disturbance. But before we proceed with sentencing, I want to confirm, do you wish to press charges against your wife for financial fraud?" My father, who had been quiet this whole time, lifted his head. His hands were shaking, but not with fear. With rage. "I trusted her," he said, voice rough. "I thought she cared about me. And the whole time, she was just waiting for me to die." The entire courtroom was silent. My father exhaled slowly, then looked straight at the judge. "Yes," he said. "I want her prosecuted to the full extent of the law." Nancy's lawyer exhaled sharply, like he had been hoping for a miracle. Now, he knew his client was screwed. The judge nodded. "Then that settles it. Given the evidence provided, I am officially ruling in favor of Mr. Hayes. Nancy Hayes will be removed from all financial documents, and all funds she illegally transferred will be returned." She looked at me and my father. "Mr. Hayes and Mr. Jacobs, you are free to go." I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. It was over. Nancy was gone. But the weight of it still lingered. As we walked out of the courtroom, my father slowed. His hands clenched and unclenched like he was holding something in. I turned to him. "Dad?" He shook his head. "I was such a fool," he muttered. His voice cracked. "I let her do this to me. I let her push you and Claire away. I let her take control of everything." He looked at me, his eyes glassy. "I almost let her kill me." I swallowed hard. Because he was right. He had almost wasted away under her control. I put a hand on his shoulder. "You're not a fool," I said quietly. "You trusted someone who didn't deserve it. But we got you back." His throat bobbed. He nodded. "Yeah." His voice was hoarse. "Yeah, I guess you did." Just as we were about to leave the building, a woman rushed up to us. "Excuse me," she called. "Are you Richard Hayes?" We turned, startled. She was in her late 50s, well-dressed, with streaks of gray in her hair. But her eyes, they were furious. I saw the case listed," she said, her voice shaking. "I had to come." My father's brows furrowed. "Do I know you?" The woman let out a bitter laugh. "No. But I know Nancy." And then, the truth came out. Nancy had done this before. To her father. "My dad was married to her 10 years ago," the woman said. "She drained his accounts, convinced him to rewrite his will, and left him with nothing. He died broke in a care home. I tried to stop her, but he was in love. He wouldn't listen." My father's face turned gray. I felt sick. Nancy had a pattern. She had done this to other elderly men, and she would have kept doing it if we hadn't stopped her. "She's evil," the woman whispered, voice trembling. "I hope she rots." I had nothing to say. For the first time, I realized, Nancy had never cared about my father. He was just another mark. And that? That hurt more than anything. A month later, Nancy was formally charged with financial elder abuse and fraud. She was denied bail. Because of the financial investigation, she faced serious time. My father? He took a while to recover, physically and emotionally. At first, he was quiet. Withdrawn. The betrayal had shaken him. But then, little by little, he started to come back. He moved to a new assisted living community, one that was actually safe. He reconnected with his old friends. He started laughing again. One day, while I was visiting, he looked at me over his cup of coffee. "I should have listened to you and Claire," he said. "You both knew she was bad news." I shrugged. "It doesn't matter now. You're safe." He was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, small but real. "Yeah. I am." And for the first time in years, I believed him. Nancy thought she had everything planned. She thought she could control my father, isolate him, and walk away rich. She thought no one would notice. But she was wrong. And now? She's exactly where she belongs. As for my father, he's finally free. And if there's one thing I've learned from this whole mess, no matter how much someone tries to isolate you, silence you, or take over your life, the truth always comes out. And when it does, justice hits harder than any revenge ever could.